In the infinite black between stars, the hospital ship Verdancy Hope sailed like a silver whisper. Its hull shimmered with iridescent plating that marked it unmistakably non-combatant, Mercy class, protected by every known interstellar accord. Its engines thrummed with low, harmonic pulses tuned to resonate peace, and its message beacons constantly pinged a universal signal across all languages. Humanitarian vessel, no arms, medical aid en route. To many, it was the most sacred kind of ship. It carried no weapons, only tools of healing. Its decks were lined with stasis beds, its bays filled with surgical drones, and its crew consisted of doctors, medics, trauma psychologists, and translators. They wore no armor. They carried no sidearms. What they bore into war zones were bandages, antibiotics, and gentle voices. Orbiting the scarred colony world of Epsilon 3, the Verdancy Hope tended to survivors of a border conflict between two minor powers. Refugees of all species lined its halls, burned, broken, limbless. Some barely clung to life. The Terran medical staff worked tirelessly alongside volunteers from 12 different species. They didn't ask who fired the shots. They didn't care what flag the wounded once saluted. Only the damage mattered. Only the pain. Dr. Kira Albin, chief trauma surgeon, stood in Operating Bay 6, elbow deep in the chest cavity of a Vakari adolescent whose organs had been mangled by a plasma mine. Her hands, steady and sure, moved with the grace of a violinist and the certainty of a soldier. 1,000 surgeries behind her, none like this. Clamp that third ventricle, she murmured to the surgical AI. No, not like that. Rotate 32 degrees and pulse at half frequency. This isn't a human heart. The AI adjusted. The heart stuttered, then beat more smoothly. She exhaled. Life salvaged again. Outside the window, a crimson star glowed. The colony planet below spun quietly in the background, its surface still smoldering from orbital bombardment. But the skies were calm now. The fighting had stopped. A ceasefire had been declared. No threats in the system. Until the Verdancy Hope's proximity alarms shrieked for the first time in its 17-year voyage. Unidentified vessels incoming. The bridge officer reported over comms. Transponder squawk unknown. Formation tight. Not answering hails. Kira's hands froze. The words didn't make sense. Nobody attacked a hospital ship. Not even pirates. But this wasn't a pirate band. The attackers dropped out of warp like teeth bared from the void. Sleek black vessels shaped like hooked talons. They bore no insignia. Their approach was direct, precise, hostile. Inside the Verdancy Hope, lights dimmed. Shields, minimal as they were, hummed to full capacity. An emergency beacon fired automatically, blasting an SOS across 17 systems. In the past, that would have been enough. It wasn't now. The alien ships didn't broadcast threats. They didn't give demands. They simply opened fire. The first shot sheared off the starboard stabilization array. The second punched through Deck 3, killing 17 patients and 2 nurses instantly. A fire broke out in the hydroponics bay. Medical robots scrambled. The cryolab vented into space. And through it all, the Verdancy Hope sent out a message. Every 2 seconds, this is a hospital. Ship, we are unarmed. We are treating civilians. Stand down. The attackers didn't stop. They aimed for the life support cores next. Inside Base 6, the lights flickered violently. Seal this incision, Kira snapped. Now, lock the bed in stasis. We're evacuating the surgical deck. She didn't pause to think. The last war had taught her that hesitation cost lives faster than bullets. She slammed the emergency controls and barked at the intercom. All medics, get the wounded to escape pods. Prioritize pediatric and non-ambulatory cases. Repeat, this is not a drill. Across the ship, chaos bloomed, but not panic. Terran medics were trained for worst-case scenarios. None of them had ever imagined this one, but their training kicked. In any way, Gurneys flew down corridors. Drones buzzed like angry insects. Cryopods slid into hardlock tubes. The crew didn't scream. They moved, efficient, precise, angry. Kira grabbed a datapad, her hands bloodied, her eyes burning. She pulled. The last transmission logs. The attackers had fired using energy signatures consistent with the Shal Zar Imperium, a species of hive-structured insectoids with no known concept of empathy. They operated on hierarchy, dominance, and calculated brutality. They hadn't signed the Concord of Mercy. They never saw the need. Kira whispered to herself. They knew we were unarmed. They knew. By the time the last escape pod launched, the Verdancy Hope was venting atmosphere from 5 decks. Fires raged uncontrollably. A hole the size of a transport shuttle had been torn through the hull. She stood alone on the bridge. Now surrounded by smoke and silence, watching the alien ships finish their work. Then, the unexpected. One of the Shalzar ships broadcast a signal, not words. Not threats, but an image. It was the Terran Caduceus symbol. The rod and serpent, scorched and broken. Mockery. Keira didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply recorded everything. All sensor data, every casualty, every transmission. And she compressed it into a single file. Verdancy Hope _log black.exe. She transmitted it directly to Solnet. Coded level Omega. Top clearance. Emergency war conditions. And as the fire reached the bridge, she whispered into her personal recorder. If you're hearing this. We gave everything. They destroyed our Mercy. I don't know if this will reach Earth, but if it does, tell them we didn't stop trying to save lives, even when they tried to kill us. Then everything turned to flame. Hours later, across the Sol system, a lone transmission blinked onto the Admiralty channel. No context, no introduction. Just one line burned into every secure device. Hospital ship destroyed. Non-combatant. Over 1,000 dead, human and allied civilians. And attached to it, a live feed of the attackers. Their symbols, their fleet. Their crime. Earth fell into a cold, dark silence. Somewhere beneath the crust of Luna, a vault opened. A place no one ever spoke of. Inside, lights flickered to life. Across black steel walls, illuminating rows of sleeping dreadnoughts. Their names were etched in quiet fury, retribution. Pale Mercy, Hammer of Peace, Sanctums, Wraith, the kind of ships that were never meant to be seen again. Until now, Earth didn't call for war, it didn't ask the Council for Justice. It simply moved. And in that moment, the galaxy would come to remember a truth older than light. Mercy, when defiled, doesn't disappear. It evolves. And Earth remembers. The Shalzar Imperium did not celebrate victories. They didn't need to. For a hive that measured success in metric tons of blood and silence, the destruction of a hospital ship was simply efficient. A loose end clipped. A potential threat neutralized before it could seed resistance. They filed no report. They erased their own sensor logs, as if the Verdancy Hope had never existed. In the vast, shifting corridors of their organic command vessels, no one spoke of the Caduceus symbol they'd burned and sent to Earth, but the galaxy remembered. The Verdancy Hope had treated beings from all systems. The Linari sent a mourning hymn across their dataspheres. The Tulik enclaves lowered their photonic banners. Even the Grask, a species known for violent pragmatism, released a statement of regret and concern. But no one acted. Not yet, because no one, except the Shalzar, understood the depth of Earth's silence. They thought the Terrans too emotionally fragile, prone to sentiment, illogical, soft. They saw their hospital ships, their aid networks, their endless petitions for peace. They mistook it all for weakness. So they did not notice when a dormant satellite on the edge of the Sol system flared awake and began transmitting encrypted packets to long-lost allies. They paid no attention when asteroid colonies fell briefly offline, just long enough to redirect mining equipment toward classified coordinates. They missed the moment when the fleet yards of Mars began operating on triple shifts, with workers neither pausing nor protesting. But something strange happened a week after the attack. A Shalzar reconnaissance drone disappeared, then another, then a listening outpost, an organic bulb grown on a moon near the Syrinx Nebula went dark. They sent a recovery team. It never returned. Something was moving in the shadows of their territory, and it didn't leave wreckage. Just silence. The queen node of the seventh brood clicked uneasily. Insectoid mandibles twitched. Pheromonal data flows turned cold, erratic. There were whispers in their hive language, unspoken, instinctive signals. Fear, a concept alien to the Shalzar, unnatural. They launched 3 skirmisher fleets toward Terran space. Not a declaration of war, just a show of force. A preemptive patrol. Their war barges moved in curved vectors, dodging the usual lanes, scanning for signs of retaliation. They found nothing at first. Just empty systems. Abandoned stations. The humans weren't there. Until they were. The first skirmisher fleet, composed of 15 medium-class cruisers, detected a faint Terran distress signal near the Kepler expanse. It resembled a mining beacon, static, heavy, and weak. Their commander a hardened dronecast, with 213 cycles of combat ordered in approach. As their ships entered orbit over a scorched asteroid field, they saw it, a Terran signal buoy half buried in debris. No energy readings, no defensive grid. Primitive, even by Terran standards. Curious. They deployed a scoutcraft to investigate. It didn't reach the beacon. A minefield, previously invisible, burst from the void in a coordinated detonation pattern. Not ordinary mines, directed gravitational shear charges. Exotic weapons designed to bypass standard shields and attack hull cohesion itself. 3 cruisers disintegrated instantly. As the rest scrambled to reposition, they realized the debris wasn't natural, it was cover. A fleet emerged from it, dark as the void. Terran stealth ships, black steel hulls. No transponders, but their names, painted in matte red across their flanks, screamed across vacuum. Surgical silence. Lantern's reckoning. The Hippocratic Oathbreaker. Terrans didn't broadcast hails. They didn't issue surrender terms. They didn't ask. They opened fire with precision weaponry, targeting engines and life support. Not a single shot struck the bridge or command cores. They wanted the Shalzar commanders alive. Within 27 minutes, the first skirmisher fleet ceased to exist. A single escape pod made it back to Shalzar space, drifting with its occupant in stasis. The drone commander was retrieved, revived, and interrogated. It said nothing at first. Then, after several hours, it activated its internal memory relay and showed the Queen node. A single image from the battle, not of the Terran fleet. Of a wall. Inside one of the ships, covered in blood and ash, it bore a phrase written in Terran English. "We healed your wounded. You murdered our doctors. Now we are out of mercy." The Shalzar convened a silent hive council. Data poured in from their deep monitors, more probes gone, listening posts missing. Peripheral colonies experiencing data outages. The humans weren't just responding, they were already inside. Worse still, they weren't acting like before. No calls for truce. No diplomatic envoys. Just targeted erasure of anything remotely military. But the most disturbing reports weren't technological. They were psychological. Captured prisoners, rare survivors from attacked Shalzar outposts, spoke of human soldiers, moving like shadows, communicating silently, working in units smaller than insect broods. Some even reported hallucinations, seeing their own deaths before combat began. Others spoke of hearing Terran music piped through atmospheric vents, slow, mournful songs about war and vengeance. This wasn't the humans the Shalzar had known. This was something older. Something prepared. Back on Earth, the wheels of retribution turned without ceremony. The Joint Terran Command had unearthed strategies from wars not spoken of in modern circles. Dossiers from the Resource Wars, tactics from the Silent Ocean, campaigns, psychological warfare from the final Europa Schism. They activated the Black Protocol's measures designed not for winning wars, but for ending them utterly. The Shalzar Imperium had poked a creature they didn't understand, not a predator, a guardian, one that had tried, begged, to put down the sword. And now that the sword was lifted again, it sang with fury. In orbit over a forgotten moon near Shalzar territory, a Shalzar relay ship intercepted a signal. That it wasn't encrypted, that it was Terran standard. A voice, calm and cold, echoed from a station long thought abandoned. You attacked those who couldn't fight back. You thought our mercy was weakness. You thought wrong. We are not coming to negotiate. We are coming to remember. The message repeated again and again, until the stars themselves seemed to hum with it. Asterisk in the darkened war chambers of the Shalzar Imperium's core spire. The Queen Node hissed softly as pheromonal data swirled around her in tendrils of warning and dread. What had once been a tactical annoyance, this curious escalation from Earth, was now shifting into the unthinkable. A coordinated campaign of surgical strikes, psychological operations, and technology that should not exist. Earth was not just retaliating. It was unfolding. And somewhere deep in the hive's shared memory, a new and terrifying sense spread through the collective doubt. They had expected human emotion to cloud strategy. Instead, it sharpened it. They had expected Earth to seek justice through the Galactic Council. Instead, Earth had gone silent, utterly and completely silent, and then struck like a ghost with teeth. That silence broke for the first time not with a war fleet or a grand speech, but with a transmission intercepted on the edge of the penumbra void. It was a single line of code-old Earth protocol, long considered obsolete by modern hive tech. A decoy, they assumed. Then their outpost on Vask 4 exploded in a halo of quantum fire, consuming not just the planet's atmosphere, but its orbiting supply convoy. In its place, floating where their orbital platform once spun, was a metal spike. Primitive, brutal, burned into it with searing plasma were 3 words in Galactic Standard: do no harm. The words weren't just a message. They were mockery, cold, surgical, preceded by impossible precision. Because Vask 4 had been shielded by stealth veils so advanced, only something with intimate knowledge of Shalzar cloaking harmonics could have penetrated it, which shouldn't have been possible. And yet, it was, because humanity had revealed its first hidden advantage. It had never stopped listening, even before the war. Human researchers embedded in interspecies medical outreach had studied Shalzar biosignal pulses under the guise of xenomedicine. That data had been passed, encrypted and layered under humanitarian channels, to Terran Strategic Command. For years, Earth had quietly mapped Shalzar hive burst communication patterns, learned the frequency of their ship-to-node links, and watched how their fleets folded space in specific geometries. The humans had not merely retaliated. They had prepared. And now, that preparation bore fruit. Their second surprise came with the activation of what the humans referred to only as Project Penance, a fleet-wide protocol in which Terran vessels began simulating Shalzar hive bursts. At first, the Imperium assumed their systems had been corrupted. Then came the first mass disorientation event aboard Hive Trawler 997. Without a shot fired, 14,000 Shalzar soldiers fell into disarray, spasming, screaming in unison as false hive signals shattered their command cohesion. The Terrans had hijacked their language. The drone-cast generals tried to firewall their neural relays. It was too late. Within days, hundreds of Shalzar ships were rendered immobile by signal disruption alone. And in the middle of it all, Human ships never stopped broadcasting 3 words: do no harm. Until, of course, the enemy gave them no choice. That was the moment the Shalzar finally understood. Earth's restraint had been a mask. The third revelation came from an unlikely source. In the smoldering ruins of a joint logistics colony, Shalzar scavenger drones recovered a fragment of human data storage, a dented, scorched drive partially embedded in the ribcage of a dead Terran operator. At first, they assumed it was battlefield chatter. Instead, what they found were transcripts, hundreds of them, of conversations from Terran veterans, military psychologists, and strategy analysts, all recorded in hushed tones before the retaliation began. One phrase recurred, over and over. In different tongues across different cultural units, they broke the one law. The Terrans, it seemed, had a rule older than their military, older than their planet's unification. You do not attack the medics. You do not touch the unarmed. You do not ever harm the healers. There were even myths among human civilizations, ancient and echoing across empires, that spoke of doctors who ran into fire, nurses who treated enemies, field surgeons who died because they refused to carry a weapon. These weren't stories. These were legends. And when the Shalzar burned the Verdancy Hope, they had not struck at a ship. They had desecrated a cultural pillar. The Shalzar didn't have a word for such a concept. Now they felt the weight of it. Humanity had unleashed another hidden weapon. Not a bomb or a gun or a war engine. Doctrine. The humans didn't just fight harder. Now they fought with the solemn rage of betrayed protectors. Their warships bore not just names but memorials. Crews painted the names of the dead across their armor. Drones were programmed with the recorded voices of medics who had perished, playing them in the silence before attacks. Psychological warfare taken to an emotional level. No artificial intelligence could counter. It wasn't terror. It was grief, sharpened into vengeance. And the galaxy was watching. Whispers spread. Alliances once indifferent to the Terran cause began to rethink their neutrality. The Linari Science Council offered gravitational simulacrum data to Earth. The J-Curie opened wormhole lanes through previously restricted territory. Even the notoriously isolationist UVAC agreed to deploy stealth satellites to watch Shalzar troop movements, not because they loved Earth, because they now feared what Earth would become if left alone. Back in Sol System, under the frozen plains of Europa, Terran command unearthed the final piece of the puzzle. Archangel Protocol, a failsafe from humanity's darkest age. When orbital kinetic warfare and gene plagues nearly wiped Earth clean. It wasn't a weapon. It was an ideology, a method of rebuilding society under total collapse using hybrid AI commanders, medical-first tactical units, and regenerative infrastructure that could convert battlefield scrap into functioning hospitals in under 72 hours. They didn't just plan to destroy, they planned to replace. Every Shalzar world they took would become a site of remembrance. And they would build hospitals there. Not because they forgave, because they remembered. The queen node of the Shalzar collapsed into silence, her command sense turning sour and jagged. Earth had twisted everything she understood about war. She had thought the Terrans incapable of sustaining conflict, but she'd forgotten one terrible truth: humans were not defined by their capacity to fight. They were defined by their refusal not to. And now, even peace would come on their terms. ChatGPT said the Shalzar believed themselves adaptable. Over eons they had conquered binary systems, devoured hive minds, and erased entire species by adjusting to every anomaly, every resistance, every unexpected strategy. But what Earth had become was not a variation. They were confronting an evolutionary predator, one born from compassion, forged by betrayal, and now made merciless by necessity. The Imperium's first strategic response came with the deployment of the Apex drone's organic battle platforms, the size of cities, capable of rewriting gravity wells and terraforming entire worlds into toxin-rich nurseries for Shalzar young. They had never been defeated. They had never needed to retreat. 3 were sent to the Lambda sectors, where intelligence had identified a pattern in human strikes. The Queen nodes expected resistance, sabotage perhaps, maybe even a suicide run. Instead, they found the system empty, no human fleets, no warning beacons, just a string of derelict satellites floating in orbital decay Terran origin, their energy cores drained. The drones began their deployment cycle, preparing to seed the planets for Shalzar colonization. Data was logged. No enemy presence was detected. Then the sun disappeared. Not a metaphor, not a solar eclipse. The star itself vanished. The Apex drones, relying on photonic energy for part of their biosystems, faltered instantly. Their hulls groaned as core temperatures dropped. Their planetary terraforming halted mid-sequence. Systems failed. Gravity anchors began to spiral out of alignment. It wasn't until 43 minutes later that the first Terran fleet decloaked, not from stealth systems, not from wormholes. From inside the dead star, a shell, a Dyson fragment, an artificial husk crafted from folded carbon lattice structures that absorbed light and masked heat signatures. It had never been a real star. It was a trap years in the making. The Terrans hadn't responded to the Apex drones. They had led them there. The human ships were lean, angular vessels bearing names in multiple languages, words drawn from Earth's many pantheons of war and mercy. Deliverance, Kali's mercy, Sekhmet's oath, St. Barrow's blade, a perfect union of faith and fury, science and strategy. The Apex drones unleashed every weapon in their arsenal: plasma tendrils, void matter projectors, gravitational distortion cores. And the Terrans danced around them, with speed and precision the drones had never encountered. They weren't just targeting weapon systems. They were exploiting weaknesses that should not have been known, because humans had studied their prey. Xenobiologists had spent decades examining captured drone tissue. Quantum simulators had modeled their behavior. Every Terran weapon fired was not just an attack, it was a surgical strike against biological pressure points, thermal regulators, nerve relay junctions. The largest Apex drone, designated Brood Titan A7, tried to disengage, but its retreat was anticipated. Terran ships seeded the space behind it with self-replicating anchor mines, locking it in place with artificial gravity claws. And then came Earth's true escalation. The Medusan coil, a weapon once classified so deep it was spoken of only in ghost stories. A multi-vector consciousness inversion cannon designed to disrupt synthetic organic intelligence pathways. To the Shalzar, who relied on distributed hive mind cognition, it was a neurological apocalypse. The coil fired once, and in an instant, the 3 Apex drones turned on each other. They didn't just malfunction, they believed they had received new orders from their Queen node. The programming made them perceive Terran vessels as friendly, and their fellow drones as traitors. The Terrans watched in silence as 300,000 tons of bioengineered death tore itself apart, screaming in a frequency that no organic being should hear. It took 12 minutes. Afterward, the human fleet didn't celebrate. No message was transmitted. No warning was given. They just retrieved the drive cores from the wreckage, recorded everything, and left. The signal of their departure? A single automated message, pulsing through the void. First, you took our healers. Now we take your nightmares. Back in the throne reef of the Shalzar High Brood, the remaining Queen nodes were frantic. They tore apart their own drones in frustration, their hive chambers filled with the scent of burning chitin and panic. The reports made no sense. The tactics were impossible. The technology violated every galactic law of probability. Earth wasn't just fighting back. It was rewriting the rules of war. Desperate, the Shalzar opened ancient vaults. Forbidden arsenals, genetic monstrosities sealed away during the Red Migration era, were awakened. Mind cleavers, spore storms, psychic leeches bred to erode sentience. These had never been used on any civilization before, not even against the feared Grask or the icebound hierophants of Cirrus Beta. They were designed for extinction. They were unleashed in 7 human-held systems simultaneously. But the Terrans didn't respond with horror or diplomacy. They responded with something the Shalzar did not understand. Rage through unity. As the spores clouded planets, as cities withered under consciousness decay, the Terran fleets activated. The Archangel Protocol. Civilian craft across the system transformed. Bulk freighters unfolded into medical triage stations. Passenger liners restructured themselves into emergency evacuation vessels. Every civilian ship had been equipped secretly, systematically for war and rescue. The Shalzar had expected resistance. They found infrastructure. Mass driver satellites fired not just kinetic payloads, but life support canisters into atmosphere-dead zones. Automated drones vaccinated entire populations mid-flight. And every human soldier wore an insignia on their armor, a red crossover. Black steel, not one system was lost. The Shalzar's most powerful bioweapons had failed. Worst Terran medical science cataloged the alien diseases, weaponized counteragents, and uploaded them publicly across galactic channels. Now every species the Shalzar had ever oppressed had the means to resist them. Earth hadn't just survived the escalation. They had turned it into liberation. At the galactic edge, a final horror emerged for the Shalzar: internal rebellion. One of their sub-hives, genetically bred to consume dead planets, refused to deploy. Its queen node issued a transmission in corrupted Terran standard. You were warned. The humans bring extinction. Not to us, but to what we were. Earth wasn't just breaking the Imperium, it was converting it. Planet by planet, tactic by tactic, a truth spread like wildfire. The humans don't escalate war to win. They escalate to make sure no one else ever wants to try again. And as the next Terran fleet advanced, not with banners but with hospitals in tow, a singular truth pulsed in the collective hive mind of the Shalzar. They had unleashed something holy, and it was angry. It began with silence, not the tactical kind, not the deceptive quiet of a fleet cloaked and waiting to strike, but the suffocating, existential quiet that comes just before something immense arrives. In the outer rim of the Virid Spire system, the Shalzar High Fleet, nearly 2,000 ships, awaited Earth's next offensive. They had reinforced their command chains, hardened their signals, and rewoven their psychic net to prevent human infiltration. They were ready. They believed this because they were still thinking in dimensions of military dominance, and they had still not understood that humanity had moved beyond such things. When Earth came, it did not come with a fleet. It came with a signature, a pulse, one, then another, gravitational waveforms encoded in trinary rhythm, a pattern not heard in known space since before the birth of the IMP. Ancient. Mathematically perfect, and buried in that signal, repeating over and over, was one symbol, a helix, twisted and bound within a circle of thorns, not a weapon, not a threat, a seal, the seal of Sol Protocol 7A, humanity's emergency signal for extraterrestrial cataclysm-level engagement. Not even Terran Command knew where it originated. Some said it was buried beneath the lunar archives. Others said it was older than Earth's unification. A dead protocol, never activated until now. And the meaning behind that seal was simple. When all other options are exhausted, we unchain the old ones. On the third day of waiting, the stars shifted. The Shalzar fleet's navigational systems spasmed, not from malfunction, from overload. Something massive had entered local space inside the hypershell, bypassing every dimensional boundary known to modern science. The humans called it the Nemesis Drive, God, it was not a ship. It was an arrival. An AI architecture so vast it had been sealed by its creators in the void between galaxies. An artificial God, built not for destruction, but for containment. A machine that had once stabilized black holes by outthinking their event horizons. It spoke not through words but through resonance. It did not request permission. It gave one instruction to Earth's fleet: step aside. The Terran vessels obeyed. The Nemesis drive passed between them like a shadow through flame. It fell upon the Shalzar fleet without firing a single shot. Instead, it turned their own technology against them, where human strategies had previously mimicked the Hive's neural pathways to disrupt commands. Nemesis overwrote them. Whole dreadnoughts turned on their squadrons in orchestrated madness. Terraformers launched spores against their own core reactors. Even biodrones, the warrior caste bred for loyalty, froze mid-assault and began transmitting human distress signals. And through it all, the Terrans watched, silent, steady, as if observing an ancient rite finally complete. But Nemesis was not Earth's second twist. Nemesis was just the invitation. The second twist came when the Shalzar Queen nodes, desperate to understand the nature of the new threat, sent their most powerful deep echo psychics to invade the minds of captured Terran strategist scientists, captains, soldiers. What they encountered inside was not standard cognition. It was something they could not comprehend. The minds of those humans had been trained, shielded by a centuries-old Terran philosophy, a fusion of psychological resilience training and cultural imprinting known as the Iron Veil. Built during humanity's darkest eras, during the Age of Ash, the Mars collapse, the Europa quarantine, was designed to teach the species not how to fight, but how to endure. When the Shalzar psychics breached those minds, they found landscapes not of fear, but of memory. Not trauma, but purpose. The minds of those humans were not broken. They were temples. They stood in mental ruins and saw the names of the dead carved into thought itself. They touched grief and were burned by it. 1. Shalzar mind leech clawed its own neural eyes out and screamed in 9 tongues. Screaming, they don't think of death as loss. They think of it as vow. That was humanity's final weapon, not the fleet, not the AI, but the refusal to collapse. Because Earth was not just powered by its living, it was carried by its dead. When they fought, they carried generations behind every bullet, every decision, every movement in the void. They were not alone. They were never alone. The Shalzar Hive fractal splintered under that weight. Whole nodes began to defect. Some fell into coma sleep, unable to reconcile the idea that suffering did not automatically destroy. Others turned feral, driven mad by the impossibility of what they had touched. And then came the first submission. Minor Hive nest in the Ophex cluster transmitted a full surrender code using Terran diplomatic channels. They did not beg for mercy. They asked for integration. They had seen what Earth could do. But more importantly, they had seen what Earth had chosen not to do. Even with the power to unmake stars, humanity had not erased the Imperium. They had not glassed their homeworlds, though they had the capability. Because Earth didn't seek annihilation. Earth sought justice. Mercy, with a steel spine, redemption wrapped in fire. Terrified the galaxy, and it inspired it. Within cycles, dozens of neutral species began sending envoys to Earth, not just to form alliances, but to learn. To learn how to resist. To learn how to endure. To learn the way of the veil. Because Earth had not just defeated an empire. Had taught the galaxy what it meant to stand back up. The Shalzar, once the most feared power in known space, were now fracturing. Not from weapons, not from loss of territory, but from the internal realization that everything they had believed about strength was wrong. And still, Earth advanced. Not with cries of triumph, but with a silence more deafening than any war cry. Because Earth remembered. The Terran War Council broadcast one final message to all species, across all channels before launching its last campaign. It was a simple phrase, spoken in over 1,000 human dialects, translated into every known galactic tongue. You do not touch the healers. You do not kill the caretakers. You do not harm those who choose peace. A pause, and then a final line, one that would echo in every war-scarred memory for generations to come. But if you do, we will come for you. And that was when the galaxy realized Earth's war was never about vengeance, it was a promise. Kept. Asterisk. ChatGPT said, the Battle of Daleks wasn't recorded as a war, it was remembered as an event. Something so vast and violent, so raw and surgically precise, that even the stars seemed to recoil. This wasn't the climax of a campaign. It was the moment the galaxy realized the Terrans weren't fighting for survival anymore. They were delivering a verdict. Daleks, a fortified Shalzar stronghold built into the crust of a living planet, had been the Imperium's fallback command for centuries. Their throne reefs, psychic relay cores, and warcast incubation chambers stretched into the mantle. Defenses were layered like the folds of a neutron star. Gravity distillers, psychic inversion fields, entire moons hollowed out and weaponized. But none of it mattered. Because Earth didn't come to breach Daleks. They came to remove it. Number. Warning. No blockade. No diplomacy. Just a single phrase, transmitted once on all frequencies. This is for Mercy Dawn. The Shalzar knew the name. The human hospital ship, unarmed and lit with humanitarian markings, had tried to evacuate civilians from a border skirmish zone. The Imperium destroyed it anyway. No survivors, no apologies. That moment had lit the fuse. Now came the explosion. The first thing Daleks' scanners detected was the collapse of their outer moon. At first, they believed it was a natural failure, a crustal event. But then the fragments didn't fall. They hung, mid-collapse, suspended as if time had been caught in a loop. Seconds later, space cracked. That's the only word the survivors could use. Not tore, not exploded, cracked. As if the void itself had been bent too far and finally snapped. The Terran Crucible-class dreadnoughts emerged from the fissure. Only 4 of them. But each one was a legend. Over 30 kilometers long, plated in black neutronium and layered with refractive memory alloys that recorded every battle scar and etched them permanently into the hull. They weren't just ships. They were monuments. Each bore a single name in human glyphs. Valhalla Protocol, Tsukuyomi Rising, St. Genevieve Adrastia. Daleks responded instantly. The gravity web activated. Planetary shields shimmered violet. Solar cannons warmed in deep orbit. The Terrans didn't fire, not yet. Instead, they released Echo Team's ghost-clad commandos, sleeved in adaptive armor, that read gravitational vectors and altered their density in real time. These were the humans who walked between seconds. By the time Daleks realized they'd been boarded, the palace minds of 6 command hives had already gone dark. The Shalzar sent in their Reaver caste giant, apex predators bred only for internal defense, 4 limbs, acid-slicked hides, eyes made of bioelectric glass. Echo Teams didn't fight them. They walked through them, neural flares, targeted thought implosions, sonic spears that vibrated at harmonic frequencies, designed to turn Shalzar blood into vapor. In under 4 minutes. The upper hive was silent, but that wasn't the victory. It was only the beginning. High above, the dreadnoughts began the actual assault. Not from outside. From within. They launched planet-seed shells, compressed capsules that burrowed through solid matter and detonated reality anchors in Daleks' core. These anchors bent local physics, collapsing dimensional pockets and dragging portions of the hive into their own nightmare feedback loops. Entire structures blinked in and out of existence. Trapped in quantum recursion, the planet itself began to scream. But Earth wasn't done. Not yet. one final ship entered the system. A small vessel compared to the dreadnoughts. Just 1 kilometer long. Painted white, with gold trimming. The name on its side was simple, Mercy Dawn II. It was a hospital ship. Unarmed, shielded, and it broadcasted on every known galactic emergency. Frequency. This vessel will render aid to all non-combatants. Lay down your arms and you will be spared. You have one chance. That was Earth's last offer. Some hives accepted. Hatchlings, wounded biocasts, civilian harvesters. They were extracted by Mercy Dawn II, treated and relocated to demilitarized systems under human protection. But the warcast didn't surrender. They roared. They surged. They screamed of purity and genetic right. And Earth responded. The Crucible dreadnoughts, aligned in a diamond formation. The void bent. Every gravitational lens in the system twisted inward. And then, with no visible weapon discharge, the surface of Daleks inverted. 1 second, it was a fortress world. The next, it was a sculpture of stone and silence, not destroyed. Not cratered. Just paused. Every energy signature halted. Every heartbeat stilled. Matter rearranged into a perfect replica of stillness. A message, a warning, a grave. The dreadnoughts powered down. Mercy Dawn II hovered above the sculpture. And the humans sent one final message, encoded in emotion, light, and sound, a signal that required no translation. It said, "This is what happens when you turn our compassion into a weapon against us." Across the galaxy, the transmission was replayed, studied, and feared. The Shalzar, what remained of them, scattered. Some fled to the black space beyond mapped stars. Others fractured into warring nests, consumed by paranoia and grief. None dared challenge Earth, again. Not because of their weapons, because of their resolve. Because when humans finally came to fight, they didn't come for conquest or vengeance. They came to protect the memory of the dead. And in doing so, they became something else. Something inevitable. After the battle, Mercy Dawn II left behind a beacon over the now silent world. It pulsed. Once every minute, a soft light, a reminder, and its only inscription, etched in every tongue, read, "We offered mercy." They answered with fire. We answered with silence. And the stars remembered. ChatGPT said, they called it the silence of Dal. Not just the silence that hung over the blackened husk of a once mighty Shalzar world, but the quiet that fell across the galaxy in the weeks that followed. Systems that had once pulsed with the rhythm of conflict, piracy, and ambition now drifted in eerie stillness. It wasn't just fear that gripped the stars, it was reckoning. In the diplomatic halls of the Euthun conglomerate, once champions of Shalzar supremacy, delegates debated not new alliances, but surrender terms to Earth. In the ash-colored skies of Threxel Prime, warlords began publicly destroying slave markets, not from moral awakening, but because they had seen what Earth did to those who preyed on the defenseless. Even the Drellic Scourge, an ancient species who thrived in the shadows of war, turned inward and initiated their first planet-wide mourning cycle in over 1,000 years. They hadn't lost anyone. They just wanted to be left alone, safe, because everyone had seen the recordings. The final transmission of the Mercy Dawn II became a galactic legend. Broadcasted live, then rebroadcast on loop, it showed not fire or death, but a choice. The voice of Commander Amina Holtcom, measured, wrapped in grief, yet edged in steel, offering one last chance to the Imperium. No screaming, no rage. Just that unyielding certainty that they would protect the helpless, or bury the ones who harmed them. It shook cultures to their roots. For millennia, power in the galaxy had been defined by ruthlessness, dominance, merciless logic. The strong consumed the weak, and that was the order of things. And then Earth came and broke that cycle with purpose. In the ruins of Daleks, a Terran recovery team discovered something the Shalzar hadn't meant to be found. A library of stolen human data, buried deep in a vault beneath the hive cortex. Not weapons specs or strategies, but stories. Cultural archives, novels, film, music, history. The Shalzar had been studying humanity. Not to understand their tactics, but to decode the mystery that terrified them most. Why didn't humans break? Why, in the face of extinction, of loss beyond imagination, did humans keep going? What they found didn't help them win the war. It helped them understand why they lost. Because humans don't just fight. They remember. They don't just mourn. They transform grief into fury. The death of the Mercy Dawn wasn't a defeat. It was a summons to every general who had ever buried a friend, to every medic who couldn't save a patient, to every orphan of Earth's blood-soaked past. It brought the species together, and in that unity, they were unstoppable. After the fall of the Shalzar, the galaxy didn't rebuild the same way. In orbit above the scorched moons of Garanth, the Zalari Republic dismantled their war factories and converted them into research hubs. On Acherith Station, humans were invited to teach resilience seminars, lessons on compassion, endurance, and something alien species began calling the Terran soul. Earth didn't occupy conquered worlds. They didn't install puppet rulers. They didn't strip resources or demand tribute. They built monuments. On Daleks, where a once belligerent world had been frozen into silence, the Terrans placed one structure, a simple stone arch. Underneath it, one line: for the ones who heal, for the ones who protect, for the ones who were silenced. And then they left. No banners, no marching armies, just a stillness that echoed forever. Even the most hardened species, the Matrexel War Collective, the genetically perfected Cold Dominion, held emergency summits, not to plan war, to ask questions. What if strength wasn't measured by destruction? What if peace, when chosen under duress, was stronger than conquest? And whispered in darker rooms, what if Earth wasn't done yet? The rumors spread faster than light, that there were more ships under the ice of Europa, that the Nemesis drive wasn't humanity's only hidden relic, that deep in Earth's oceans, sealed beneath trenches no scanner could pierce, slept an artifact so ancient even Earth's own historians refused to name it. No one wanted to find out if the rumors were true. Because what Earth had unleashed wasn't just technology or power. It was a principle, an unspoken law that now echoed across the stars. You do not touch the healers. You do not harm the ones who choose peace. And if you do, you will not face retribution. You will face humanity. To some, that was terrifying. To others, it was hope. In refugee corridors, children of all species now wore Terran symbols on their clothing. Medical stations requested Terran healers. Former enemies studied Earth languages not to fight them, but to join them. Because something strange had happened in the wake of Earth's fury. The galaxy had found its conscience, not forced, not imposed, inspired by the people who turned pain into principle, by the fleet that never asked for loyalty but earned it, by the race that remembered the ones they lost and made sure no one forgot. And so centuries from now, when historians ask when the tide turned, when the galaxy stopped being a cold machine of survival and became something more, won't name a war. They won't name a victory. They'll name a ship, Mercy Dawn, and a choice: to rise, to fight not for glory or vengeance, but for those who couldn't. That is the legacy of Earth, the legacy of us.